Have you ever been there? Facing a choice so tough, so completely paralyzing, that it feels like every single option is the wrong one? Well, today, we're diving into one of the most incredible dialogues ever about that exact feeling. It's a conversation between a warrior at his breaking point and his divine guide, right on the edge of a massive war. Let's get into it.
So this is the voice of Arjuna, maybe the greatest warrior of his generation. And here he is, on the battlefield, looking across at his own family, his teachers, his friends, and he just falls apart. He's totally lost. And it's this desperate cry for help that kicks off a lesson on life, death, and duty that has echoed for thousands of years.
So what exactly is tearing Arjuna apart? This isn't just a case of getting cold feet before a battle. No, this is a deep, profound moral crisis. It's hitting him at the very core of who he is. Let's really dig into what's going on in his head.
I mean, just look at this list. You can really feel his torment, right? First off, he's supposed to attack his own teachers, men he's revered his whole life. It's unthinkable to him. He says any victory would just be stained with their blood, totally meaningless. He's so twisted up he doesn't even know if it's better to win or to lose. And the thought of killing his own relatives, he feels like it would just poison his whole life, making it not even worth living. The grief is just overwhelming him.
And this right here really shows you how deep his despair goes. You see, this isn't about winning or losing some prize. He says it flat out. Even if he won an unrivaled kingdom, the whole world, it wouldn't even touch the sorrow he feels. His problem is spiritual. And with that, he makes up his mind.
And that's it. He puts down his famous bow and says, "I'm not fighting." For Arjuna, the war is over before it even started. And it's in this moment of total surrender, of complete collapse, that his charioteer, his guide Krishna, finally starts to speak. And his response is probably the last thing anyone would expect.
See? Krishna doesn't start talking about battle strategy or politics. He doesn't try to pump him up. Instead, he completely changes the game. He reframes the entire problem by shifting the focus away from the temporary physical world to the real, eternal self.
Wow, talk about a direct response. Krishna basically looks at him and says, "You sound smart, you're using all the right words, but you're grieving for something that isn't even worthy of grief." He's saying Arjuna's whole crisis is built on a misunderstanding of what's real. The wise, he says, they get it. They don't mourn for bodies, whether living or dead, because they know that's not the whole story.
So Krishna lays out this fundamental split. On the one hand, you've got the material body. It's temporary. It's born, it grows, it fades, and eventually it ends. It's a sure thing. But then on the other hand, you have the soul. And the soul is eternal. It's everlasting. It doesn't change. And here's the key. It cannot be slain. So the killing that Arjuna is so horrified by, it's only the destruction of a temporary shell.
This is probably one of the most famous analogies ever for reincarnation, and it's so beautifully simple. You know how we take off old clothes and put on new ones? We don't cry for the old shirt we're throwing out. Krishna says the soul does the exact same thing with bodies. It's just a natural transition, not some tragic end.
And to really drive this point home, Krishna describes the soul as totally invulnerable. You can't cut it with a weapon, you can't burn it with fire, you can't dry it with wind. It's indestructible. So with that in mind, how can anyone really kill or be killed? This idea becomes the foundation for a whole new way of acting in the world.
All right, so if the soul is eternal and can't be harmed, what does that mean for us right here, right now? What are we supposed to do? Well, this is the second part of Krishna's answer. It's all about how to live and act in this material world once you understand your true nature.
Okay, this right here, this is the absolute core of the whole teaching. It's a huge idea. Krishna tells Arjuna, look, you have a right and a responsibility to do your duty, your dharma, but you have absolutely no right to the results. You shouldn't be attached to the outcome, whether you win or lose, get praised or get blamed.
For Arjuna, this means he has to fight because that is his duty, but he has to do it with a steady mind. He can't be all excited about winning or terrified of losing. The focus has to be 100% on the action itself, done as a sacred duty. It's a lot like what we call a flow state today, right? Where you're so deep in the process that the result almost doesn't matter.
And this state of perfect balance, that's what's being defined here as yoga. Now, we're not talking about the physical postures you might do in a studio. In this context, yoga is the art of all work. It's being able to stay steady and calm whether you succeed or you fail. That, Krishna says, is real skill.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, because acting this way, without being attached to the results, is the key to freedom.
It untangles you from the chains of karma, from the consequences of your actions that keep the soul stuck in that endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
Okay, so what does a person who has actually mastered this look like? How do they walk and talk and live in the real world? Arjuna is wondering the same thing, and his question leads to this incredible description of a self-realized person.
I just love this question because it's so practical, so real. Arjuna's basically saying, okay, this philosophy sounds amazing, but show me what it looks like. How can I spot someone like this in my day-to-day life? He wants to see the tangible signs of this incredible inner peace.
And Krishna's answer is just beautiful. He says, this person finds joy from within, not from chasing fleeting pleasures outside. They're like a rock in the middle of a storm. They still experience life's ups and downs, but they aren't thrown around by them. The big, powerful emotions like attachment, fear, and anger, they just don't have a grip on this person. My favorite analogy is the tortoise. They can pull their senses inward, away from the world whenever they need to. And just like an ocean that stays full and steady, even though rivers are always pouring into it, they aren't disturbed by the constant flow of desires.
And to show just how high the stakes are, Krishna lays out the opposite, the domino effect that leads to ruin. And look how simply it starts, just thinking about sense objects. That thinking leads to attachment. Attachment becomes lust, and when lust isn't satisfied, it turns into anger. Anger clouds your judgment, makes you forget who you are, and poof, your intelligence is gone. It's a step-by-step warning about where an uncontrolled mind will take you.
So at the end of the day, peace isn't something you go out and find. It's not a place you can travel to. It's the natural state of a mind that is controlled, steady, and free from that endless chase for more, free from the illusions of ego. Without that inner stability, Krishna says there can be no peace. And without peace, well, how can there ever be happiness?
This whole dialogue happened thousands of years ago on an ancient battlefield, but its central challenge feels more real today than ever, doesn't it? We live in a world that is practically designed to distract us, to keep us wanting more. And this ancient wisdom offers us a path to something different. It leaves us with a huge question to think about. In the battlefield of our own modern lives, what does it truly take to cultivate that inner stillness, that steady mind?
You know that feeling, right? When you're stuck facing some huge, life-altering choice, and you just feel completely paralyzed. You know you've got to do something, but you have absolutely no idea what the right thing is. Well, let's dive into that, because we're about to explore an ancient text that tackles this exact problem head-on. So the whole thing kicks off with this desperate plea from a warrior, Arjuna, who's literally standing on a battlefield. I mean, can you imagine? He's torn between his duty as a soldier and the fact that he's about to fight his own family. His confusion, that's the starting point for everything we're talking about today. It boils down to that one question: what do you do when you just don't know what to do? Okay, so Arjuna's a soldier, but his crisis, it's not really about war, not at its core. It's about something we've all felt, right? That feeling of being completely overwhelmed by our duties, where it seems like every single option is the wrong one. That's the dilemma this whole text is trying to unravel. So when you're that confused, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's, what if I just do nothing? Just step back, wait for the dust to settle, and try to avoid making a bad choice. It seems so logical, doesn't it? Well, turns out this ancient wisdom has let's just say a very strong opinion on that particular strategy. And yeah, the text just completely shuts that idea down, flat out. It says very clearly that just abstaining from work or trying to renounce your duties, that's not going to get you to freedom or perfection. In fact, it's a total dead end. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it breaks down two very different ways to handle this. First, you've got the pretender. This is the person who on the outside looks like they've stopped acting. They're sitting still, but on the inside, their mind is just racing, totally consumed by desires. The text actually calls this person deluded. But then you've got the sincere person. This is someone who uses their mind to control their senses and then acts, but, and here's the key, they do it without being attached to the outcome. And the text is crystal clear. This person is by far superior. And if that wasn't clear enough, here's the final nail in the coffin for the whole do-nothing idea. The text makes this crucial point. Inaction is literally impossible. You can't do it. Our very nature forces us to act every single moment. I mean, you're breathing, you're thinking, you're choosing. You are always in a state of action. So that option to just check out and do nothing, it was never really on the table to begin with. Okay, so wait a minute. If we're forced to act, but acting is the very thing causing all this confusion and stress, then what on earth are we supposed to do? It sounds like a trap, right? Well, this is where the text introduces its core teaching, a really powerful framework for how to act in the right way. And that framework is called karma yoga, the yoga of action. So what is it? It's the art of doing your duty, of taking action, but, and this is the absolute key, you do it without being attached to the results. You pour all your energy into doing the action itself as best you can, and then you just let go of the outcome. Whether you succeed or fail, that's not your focus. But why is doing our duty so important? Well, this is where it gets kind of mind-blowing. The text shows how our little individual actions are not isolated at all. They're part of this huge cosmic cycle. See, when we perform our duties, it's seen as a type of sacrifice, an offering to keep the whole system in balance. And that single act triggers a chain reaction. Sacrifice brings rain. Rain grows food, and food sustains all life. So by just doing our part, we are literally helping to hold the entire world together. How cool is that? And this explains why even someone who is totally enlightened, someone who doesn't need or want anything for themselves, still acts. Why would they? They do it for everyone else, to set an example, to help keep the world running smoothly, and to guide people who are still figuring things out. Their actions become this selfless gift to humanity. All right, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great in theory. Just act without attachment. Yeah, sure. Easy to say, but in real life, it feels pretty much impossible. There's always something inside us that's pulling us towards selfish desires, or making us anxious about the results, or afraid of failing. It really does feel like we're fighting a battle against ourselves. And guess what? Arjuna asks that exact question, and it's a question that is so painfully relatable. What is this thing inside me that pushes me to do things I know are wrong, even when I don't want to? It's like I'm being forced to do it against my will. Man, we've all been there. The text's answer is incredibly direct, just one word: lust. Now, hold on, it doesn't just mean physical desire. In this context, lust means any intense, selfish craving for your own personal satisfaction, whether it's a craving for praise, for power, for stuff, anything. This, the text says, is the all-devouring, sinful enemy that lives inside every one of us. And to help us really grasp what this enemy does, the text gives us 3 amazing metaphors. It says this lust can cover up our true consciousness in different ways. Sometimes it's really obvious, like smoke covering a fire. Other times it's more subtle, like a fine layer of dust on a mirror that you just need to wipe away. And sometimes it's buried really deep, completely covering our awareness, like an embryo inside the womb. So where is this enemy hiding? Where are its bases of operation? The text pinpoints them. It's in our senses, our mind, and yep, even our intelligence. It's so sneaky. It uses the very tools we have for understanding the world to trick us and cloud our judgment. Okay, so now we know who the enemy is, and we know where it lives. So now that we've identified the enemy and located its hideouts, the text lays out a clear strategy for how to win. This is the battle plan for our inner world. The whole strategy hinges on understanding our own internal chain of command. Think of it like a ladder. At the bottom, you have the senses. They're what interact with the world. Above them is the mind. Higher up is the intelligence, our ability to reason. And right at the very top is the soul, our true self. Now, here's the deal. The higher levels are supposed to be in charge of the lower ones. The whole problem starts when that system gets flipped upside down. When our senses and our mind start calling the shots and telling our intelligence what to do instead of the other way around. So the solution, the path to victory, is to use our highest power, our intelligence, to get the mind under control, to steady it. Because once the mind is steady, it can control the senses, which is where all that selfish desire gets started. And by doing that, the text concludes, we can use our own spiritual strength to finally conquer this enemy inside us. So you see, the path was never about not acting. It was about learning to act with a clear, controlled, and purposeful mind all along.